Thank you guys. Brian, thank you for having us and the whole Sync team. Super stoked to be here because it's the first time we've been back since we've been on dry land, so it feels really good. If you can dream it, do it, is the first words I said to my 5-year-old son after 40 days at sea. Charlie and I stepped on land in Antigua, and instead of saying, "I love you, I've missed you," I said to Oscar, remember these words for your whole life. If you can dream it, do it. And we say it every night. And that's what this talk's going to be about. Brian, we're on an old school slide. So,
I'm here for it.
So what was our dream? Brian mentioned it. Charlie and I had a dream to row across the second largest body of water on Earth, the Atlantic Ocean. 3,000 miles from La Gomera in the Canary Islands, off the coast of Africa, to Antigua in the Caribbean. It was a race. There were 40 other boats, and unsupported, unaided. So we had to carry everything for 70 plus days at sea. We trained for 2 years. And to put that in perspective of how far is 3,000 miles, that would be like rowing from LA across the United States to Charleston, and then if you're not tired enough, rowing down to Miami. I mean, that is a long way on an airplane. Please. So, who am I? I'm not a rower. I'm not an athlete. I, in this picture, am 1 year older than Oscar. I lost my father at 5. He died of drug and alcohol overdose. And so, I left home at 16, fairly dysfunctional upbringing, to become a chef. I ended up working for some of the best chefs in the UK. I ended up coming to America working for Gordon Ramsay, which was good training for this row. It was a, and now I'm a restaurateur. And really what I am is I'm a team builder. So here I am with my first restaurant when I was 26 in New York. And ironically, 2 of the people in this picture are the head chefs at my restaurants here in Charleston. We build teams, we build community. I'm also the proud father of Oscar and Iris, 5 and 2.
Is everyone else enjoying that picture as much as I am?
I look very smart. Okay, so 2020, the reality. What sparked this for us? So like much of us, we're all, much of you, really affected by COVID. I'm in the hospitality business. This is what 2020 looked for me like in March. The X's are ones that we've lost since then, that have closed, and the slashes were ones that were ready to open. We had 1 restaurant that was open in March of 2020, and it was open for takeout, and we had 2 employees. It was dire. One of those employees was the executive chef, Charlie. I thought Charlie and I should sit down and make a end of year or beginning of year review. Charlie, where do you see yourself in 6 months? Where do you see yourself in 2 years? Which was ironic because I'm not sure the restaurant was going to be there in 6 months. Charlie, as always the most chipper guy you've ever met, I said, Charlie, where do you see yourself in 6 months? He said, well, I see myself rowing the Atlantic Ocean by the time I'm 30. Which was the most incredible answer anyone has ever given in a company performance review. So immediately I said, Charlie, me too. This is fantastic. Forget this meeting. Everything is terrible. There's no more takeout that we can do. So we immediately stopped talking about how dire the restaurants were and how terrible and tragic what was going on in the world. And we signed up to row the Atlantic. They said they were full. We emailed them again. They said they were full. We emailed them every single day for 2 weeks. Finally, the race director said, if you're doing this, you've got what it takes to row across the Atlantic. So she let us in. So here we are, ready to go. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my teammate, Charlie. Charlie is also a very handsome Englishman. Charlie had a love of beer and hamburgers before he came to the healthy South. Charlie was given the company bicycle and started biking 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 miles a week. He also started a plant-based diet when he came to work at Basic Kitchen, and Charlie lost nearly 100 pounds and got in the shape of his life for this row, and we did it together. There is not a better person in the world to take on this challenge. And everyone asked me, and I'll be honest with you, Charlie. Everyone said, is Charlie the right person to go and row the Atlantic with? And I had watched Charlie work through the night, rise to every challenge during COVID. I said, I've watched this guy when the chips were down, everyone else had left. There was one person still there fighting for the one restaurant we had. And I said, I promise you, Charlie is the guy. And Charlie proved to not only be the guy, but the superhero in the Atlantic. So we've got our dream, we've got a team, and reality sets in. And this is so often the case with people, right? We had no funds. We'll come back to that later. We had no boat. In fact, we didn't even know how to get a boat. Some of the boats are made in England. Charlie and I had zero ocean rowing experience. In fact, neither of us had ever been out the harbour. Neither of us had ever rowed before. We talked a big game. And my nickname at the gym at Ethos was Ham Sandwich. So, and that's all true. So our dream versus reality, I think people often forget, when you want to do something, there's never a straight path. You've just got to sign up, you've got to jump feet first, and then start working out the details. Don't worry about the details. Take a risk. So we did take a risk. This is something we've learned in the last 2 years. Life at 1s and 10s is so much more enjoyable than in the 5s and 6s. Unless you experience the 1s, which is the fear, which is the panic that we've got no funds, no boat, no ocean rowing experience, unless you know what that feels like, the feeling in the Atlantic Ocean when the sun is coming up and you're surrounded by 300 dolphins and you're playing some epic Euro house music, that's a 10. When you arrive in Antigua having won the transatlantic rowing race at 5 o'clock as the sun's setting and every mega yacht and horn is going off and you see your loved ones, that's a 10. But we also didn't sleep for more than an hour at a time for 40 days. So those are the 1s. Our hands were blistered the whole time. Our butts those are the 1s. But then we experience these 10s, and we only remember the 10s. I'm not telling you about my sore hands and sore butt. I'm telling you about the 10s. So remember that. The 1s and 10s. 5s and 6s is okay. So I think sometimes in the world we live in, guys, we look through social media and we think everything is so easy. And actually, when we started this, and I go back to that list, we had nothing figured out. And it takes you to jump to realize that other people are rooting for you, are supporting you, want to get involved, want to come on this journey in some way. And this is where Brian came in. Alex kindly said, I've got a guy you should meet. And emailed Brian, and we weren't sure this could happen, but we were convinced somehow it would happen. And Brian was interested in it. He said, yeah, what you guys are doing really makes sense for us. I was like, I can't understand why quite yet, but yes, Brian, it does, absolutely. And then Brian said, but I need you to do this for us. And so we started having this conversation. I thought, wow, we've got our first partner. This is becoming a reality. And once you get that, you then start going to the tennis, and we talk to 1,500 people a weekend, and then suddenly you get a next partner and a next. You've got to put yourself out there, and you've got to have a lot of no's. But Brian, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for what you did to start this campaign, and I'm so proud to be here tonight. So these are some of the things we did. There wasn't anything that we wouldn't do to talk about the Dreamboats. From cooking to cold plunges to tennis to restaurants, we would take our boat anywhere and speak to anyone who would listen. So before you do something, as I said, we had no idea how to row an ocean. We got this boat eventually, it arrived here, and Charlie and I looked at each other and we had no idea how it worked. It looked like a spaceship. We spoke to our good friend Rob, who's been here many times, who's walked to 2 poles. We talked about what's the mindset you need for an expedition like this. He has walked to the poles in the 80s. We engaged with Duncan, who had rowed the Atlantic twice and the Pacific once. And we said, Dunk, you got to come out to Charleston and teach us how to use this boat. He came out here for a week. We didn't sleep for a week, and I literally mean we slept for 2 hours a night for a week. It was the most intense thing I've ever done, agreed? Yeah. And so suddenly, we know how to use our boat. And then he would help us passage plan as we rowed from Florida to Charleston as our training rows. The first time we went out there, Charlie and I, 26 miles offshore, rowing out from Jacksonville, and we hit this big thunderstorm, and we are absolutely bricking it because neither of us had that experience. We called Duncan, we said, Duncan, we should row in. He said, absolutely not. You guys are rowing to Charleston, the storm will pass, get on with it. In the Atlantic, you won't be able to row home. So, trained hard, 4 a.m. 4:45 wake-ups, late nights, weekends, everyone's on board. Yeah. When you get out to the Atlantic Ocean, there is no store, there's no gas station, there's no hotel. You have to have everything you need for at least 75 days at sea. And so and if any of you know me or Charlie, we are not the most organized fellows. So that means triple check, double check, count. We had the average person eats between 1,500 and 2,500 calories a day. We were eating between 6,000 and 8,000 calories a day. So we had 1 million calories of food. We had to count all those calories and make sure we had enough that we weren't going to run out. We had spares of absolutely everything on that boat. We had multiple buckets, which were our bathrooms that we shared for 40 days. So as you can see, this is preparing for 2 weeks in La Gomera, but it was a double, triple, and you have to have faith in your partner to do that. So preparation is everything for us on our road. And then setting our intentions. I know at Synchronicity you talk about this a lot, but when you're going into essentially battle, there's no negotiating in the middle of the storm. And we had days where the winds were up to 40 miles an hour and the seas were up to 40 foot. We had moments where things went horribly wrong, or we had a huge disagreement on how we should handle a situation. But we had spent months going through scenarios and agreeing how we would handle those situations when they arose. Because Charlie and I were so tired that we were hallucinating all the time. This is no time to start working out your relationship. So we had some words that we live by. Execution. We've done all this work for 2 years. Our goal was to move that boat as quickly and as safely as possible across the Atlantic Ocean. And we would do whatever it took to do that. We were going to execute our plan with all the skills and the team that we had put around us. Accountability. The one thing is the most fearful of ocean rowing is when you're sleeping and you're in your watertight pod that you guys will see in a minute. The other person is on deck rowing. They have the sole responsibility for your life in that boat. So if they start going beam onto waves, or they make some poor decisions, or they decide that they're just not going to row very much, or they're going to take a nap because they haven't slept, then you're in real danger. We were accountable every time we sat on that rowing seat. We were going to row as hard as we can and as safely as we could. And the other person was accountable for doing the cooking, all the chores, and making sure that when you got off that seat, you came with a hot meal, all your stuff was ready, and we were accountable to one another. Charlie and I are late for everything in our lives here in Charleston. We were never late for one shift for 40 days on the Atlantic Ocean because we said we're accountable to one another. And then finally, one of the advice we got from all the people who had done these massive journeys, walked to poles, crossed oceans, they said sometimes people forget to enjoy it, and you're probably not going to go back and row the Atlantic again. So we said, whatever we do, we're going to have fun. And so at the root of everything that we did, we said a happy boat is a fast boat. And we beat, and Charlie will tell you this, we beat 2 British Special Forces who were behind us. We beat them by 100 miles, and they came off, stepped onto land, and they said, we don't understand how the Dreamboats found an extra half a knot. And these guys are the toughest soldiers in the world. And I said, a happy boat's a fast boat. And we just played music, laughed, and had a great friendship. So I'm going to let Charlie tell you about the actual row itself.
Yeah, right on. So, December 12th at 12:37 p.m, we set off from La Gomera. And it was windy. We had a headwind as we left. And we had both made the plan to row 2 up. So we were going to have no breaks for what we thought was going to be 8 hours. And then we were going really well. So we kept on going for 10 hours. We rowed together. pulling as hard as we could to try and establish what little lead we could. And you wouldn't think it, 2 chefs, restaurateurs from Charleston went out against some top athletes, people that had been training for 3 or 4 years, and we smoked them. We were rowing with everything we had, and then we settled into a 2-hour on, 2-hour off schedule. And that in itself has its worries, especially when you counter in the 20-foot swells that we rode right into, which is something you can't experience on a boat in Charleston until you get 20, 30 miles offshore. There's no getting you ready for the ocean out there. As soon as it gets deep, the swells just hit differently. And I was really lucky that I didn't get seasick, but Ben, unfortunately, did get quite seasick. And so settling into that, whilst also trying to maintain your lead, was pretty tough. We had a rocky first 5 days. I think it was on the 5th day that Ben actually, I made him sleep through the night, because the only way you get over seasickness is if you sleep properly, rest and stay warm. So I was like, just get in the cabin, I've got this. I can sit on deck for 8 hours, no problem. Luckily, he wakes up the next morning and he's a little bit better. So there's a saying in ocean rowing that we'd heard a little bit before we went. A lot of the veterans of the sport were saying, oh, it looks like it's going to be quite a rich crossing this year. Oh, that's a rich crossing. And we're like, what is a rich crossing? What does that mean? And it wasn't really until day 30 when the safety officer rang us up and said, boys, you've had a rich crossing. So, what does that mean? On day 6, as we're rowing, we're both on deck, and all of a sudden there's a loud bang. Crash! Me and Ben are thrown off our seats, and we're like, we're in 3-mile deep water and we've hit something. Something had hit us. Ben stuck his head bravely underneath the boat to see what it was, and narrowly missed being lanced by a marlin. And I'm not kidding, guys, it was this big. It was huge, darting around trying to catch the fish that were living under the boat in the shadow. We checked for damage, and luckily we couldn't see anything wrong, so we carried on. The boat seemed to be working fine. So we're rowing and rowing and rowing. And then the weather starts to pick up, and we get a phone call from our weather router, and it's like, oh, this is going to be quite a big system. The wind's going to pick up to 25 miles an hour. It's like, okay, well, 25 miles an hour, that's a little bit faster than we used to. And it's like, yeah, that's today. Tomorrow it's 30 miles an hour. And the day after that it's 35 miles an hour. And then it ended up getting up to 42 knots, which is fast. That's when you're sitting down and you can hear the wind screaming past you, even if you're going in the same direction. It is loud. Not a lot of boats would go out in that, especially sailboats, but because we were a rowing boat, you can kind of, luck had it was in the right direction, and you can kind of ride the waves. So at the peak of this, day 10, it was the day after Christmas, the waves were 40 foot high, and we're rowing, and all of a sudden, we're going down one wave, we get a small slide swell, and we're in the water. It happened so quickly, the boat capsized, we're out of the water, I look round to Ben, and he's already back in the boat. And then before I know it, I'm back in the boat, and we're getting all our things together. And let me tell you guys, this was the thing that we were the most scared of. Rowing up until that point, we were scared. And there was one moment where both me and Ben had to call Duncan and be like, what do we do? Because this isn't something we're ready for. This is bigger than we've ever experienced. And even a seasoned ocean rower was like, that's bigger than I've ever experienced, but you've trained for this. And we had. Everything was back on the boat. And before we knew it, we were rowing again. And the adrenaline from that, knowing what our boat could do and what we could do and how we were trained and how we kept to our script was really, really quite amazing. So we're rowing on, and slowly the weather starts to subside, and we get into these nice 20-foot small waves. 20-foot small waves is ridiculous. But we get to 20 foot and we're like, wow, it's calmed down, it's pretty nice. And then it's about 5:45 in the morning, and all of a sudden we go off course, and this has happened a few times in the swells. You're going up and down, your auto tiller sits on your tiller arm, and it just popped off, and we're like, oh, the tiller arm's popped off, we'll go and pop it back on, it's fine. Get into the cabin and it's not off, but it's just jarring. It's like, okay, there's something wrong here. Try and row round, get it back on, nothing. We're trying for 3.5 hours to row back into the wind and get us going again, and we're going nowhere, we're just spinning round in circles. At this point, we're tired. Both of us haven't slept our normal 2 hours, which doesn't seem a lot. And we're starting to think, well, there's something wrong with the boat. And at that point, Ben, again, bravely grabs the goggles, sticks his head under, and it's like, oh, our rudder's backwards. Our rudder's backwards. It's 1,500 miles from shore and our rudder's backwards. I don't think that's right, but okay, we can fix that. We'll turn it round. Ben goes to take off the tiller arm and spin the rudder around, and then the rudder just comes up in his hand. He's like, oh, well, our rudder's broken. And I don't think I've ever felt happier that our rudder was broken. It was a wave of joy. We have a spare rudder. It's all okay. We have a spare rudder, but we have to put the rudder in the bottom of the boat. And it's 20-foot swells, and we're tired. It's quite daunting. And then, as we figured this out, the bottom half of our rudder floats off, and it's got a small plastic collar that fits it into the boat. Oh, that's quite important, isn't it, Ben? Like, yeah, that is quite important. So what did we do? We pulled out some duct tape, and we had some beeswax. So we made a collar out of duct tape and beeswax that actually took us the next 1,500 miles to shore, which is in itself quite amazing and a real stroke of luck. Ben was brave enough to jump in. I stayed in the cabin, luckily nice and a little bit warmer, ready to receive the tiller and plumb it all in, and we were off again. And we thought, well, if this doesn't stop us, nothing will. And then 2 days later, we forget to change our battery over, and we have a complete power failure. So we have to go with no electronics for 3 hours, hand steering through the storm, with a dodgy rudder that's not quite as responsive as it should have been. So it's a battle for 3 hours to get enough power to then put our auto tiller back on, to then still have no power throughout the day, to just have enough power to make water. It was quite a challenge. But we did it, and we thought, well, now we're unstoppable. All the time, we were in the lead. We had kept our lead from the beginning, and I think we had still maintained 60 miles on them, and they had had basically a whole day to catch us. So it was pretty jaw-dropping stuff. All through this, we had one big sticker on our stern cabin: be where your feet are. And when we were getting ready for the race, I kind of understood. It's like, be where your feet are. You know, you are here to do your thing. You've chosen to be here. And it always rang true. And there was one morning where we woke up and we'd lost some miles on Tickerilla, our nearest rivals. And I was quite upset. I was like, we've just been rowing really hard. We're really tired, like putting in the extra miles, and they've gained on us. And Ben just turned to me and was like, don't you understand? Be where your feet are. Don't worry about what they're doing, because maybe they've got a different weather system. They're 70 miles behind us. Be where your feet are. Control what you can control. Be on the boat. And that was the dawning point on me. That was like, no matter what we do, as long as we do what we know we can, we'll always have a good time. A happy boat is a fast boat. So enjoy it. Seize the moment. And just remember why you're here. And that brings us to the next slide, which is teamwork. There's nothing that can be said, like, people that have done this on their own, I don't understand how they can. The biggest part of this for me was being able to do it with my best friend. And obviously there were arguments. It's undoubted when you haven't slept and you're seeing things all night and you're thinking that all the snacks are disappearing, and it might just be because a squirrel might have got on board, or it might just be because your teammate was hungry and couldn't eat anything else. It was quite open and honest with each other was like the key part of it. So every morning, taking time for ourselves and working together, because when you're asleep, your life is in your teammates' hands. So having that bond, and I think we were lucky to have that bond before we left, was so important. So life on board a 25-foot rowing boat is quite challenging. It'd be nice if it was 40 foot. You might have a double bed. It was rocky. There's not a lot of space on board. As you can imagine, it gets quite hot in the Atlantic, the sun beaming down on you. There were times where there wasn't a lot of clothes, and it's very close quarters. I got to know Ben very, very well, I would say, especially when it comes to having to use the bathroom and your other friend has just got onto the oars. There's no stopping. You just have to do what you got to do. Your hands get torn up immediately the first 5 days. Even people that had tried to train their hands, like doing grip control and everything, you're still going to get blisters, you're still going to get salt sores, and you have to learn to push through that. By the 5th day, you kind of forget that that's happening, and you're just going, and then you build up these calluses. And it's quite odd, actually. We found that on the 37th day, when we know we're almost there, that's when everything starts hurting again. So your hands, like all your blisters come back, and you're like, oh, this actually is really sore. But there's something amazing about your mind when you get into that situation and you know that you're rowing away from everything you love. You can just know where your destination is and kind of block that out of your mind. You can see our living quarters here that Ben's kindly giving you a tour of. It's quite a short tour because there wasn't a lot of space. You literally get into your cabin. Luckily, you can't roll around too much, so you're in there, and that's it. Get your head down as quickly as you can. It's not the most comfortable, but you learn to love it. Especially, it's a bit more comfortable than getting wet every 5 minutes from breaking waves. So you learn to get it. Every morning, we had breakfast together, which was our big non-negotiable. 8 o'clock as the sun was rising, sit and face each other, because the whole time when you're rowing, your teammate's behind you. So to have that 10-15 minutes to turn around and just have a chat about how you're feeling, like what you think the day's going to hold, how yesterday was, what was your favourite podcast you listened to at night, what do you recommend listening to. Unfortunately, we only had 12 playlists, and it sounds like a lot of music. It's not. You'll go through that in a day. But we both had about 100 episodes of one podcast, so we would listen to it and talk about it with each other, and that was like a real saving grace for us, and it really brought us together a lot more. We also decided that we were going to seize the night. A lot of people find night rowing the scariest. It is terrifying when you've got massive waves coming at you that you can't see. You just have to trust that you're going in the right direction, following the wind. So we decided to pump our music a little louder, get some glow sticks out, race each other, just enjoy it. Try and ignore all the hallucinations that are going on around you. There aren't any parking attendants in the middle of the Atlantic, let me tell you that. It might seem they're coming to give you a ticket. Don't worry, you can get away from them. And honestly, that's how we won the race. And that's every night every morning we woke up and we got our stats report from Duncan on the shore, and he was like, oh, you've put like 6 miles on Tickerilla. You've put like 12 miles on the team in front of you. You're going to get there. You're going to beat them. And that was really down to enjoying ourselves. So obviously Ben was talking about the 1s and the 10s, and there were some 10s, let me tell you, in the middle. Especially after the hardest days, it seems that the sea would calm down for 2 hours. And I think it was after we capsized, the sea calmed down for literally, as the sun was setting, everything went calm. And then we started to see like some blowholes off the bow of the boat, and you're like, oh, what is that? Like, that's cool. Oh, it's a dolphin. Oh, it's another dolphin. Oh, it's 3 dolphins. It's 10 dolphins. It's 100 dolphins. And then all of a sudden, as far as you can see, there are dolphins breaching, jumping, really putting on a show for us. And it's like there's no other explanation for it. The sun was setting and they were all jumping around the boat. It was mind-blowing. Something that I've never witnessed, and I don't think I've ever been as excited. I felt like a child. It was amazing. It was truly, truly awesome. We had other things. We had great white sharks. We had a whale, an unidentified whale that was a lot bigger than us. We had killer whales blasting past. It was truly, truly awesome.
We didn't capture any of them.
We didn't capture any of them because of our power failure. But what really pushed us was our friendship. Knowing that I could turn to Ben and say, Ben, I'm not okay, or Ben, I see you're not okay, and having that humility to talk to each other about the problems we were facing. It really was epitomised in the first days where Ben was sick, and he's a tough bugger. He wouldn't say no. He was like, no, we're signed up to this race, I'm going to go. Ben actually got food poisoning 3 days before we left La Gomera, so he was in bad shape, and it's like, dude, like, take it easy. It's like, no, we're going out the blocks, we're going to do 10 hours on. It's like, okay, cool. After that, let's have a break. No, we're rowing 2 hours on, 2 hours off. And it wasn't until I literally said to him, Ben, you're sleeping through the night, that he actually was like, okay, and started getting better. And he did the same for me. When I woke up and I wasn't feeling great, he was like, just have half an hour extra, make the breakfast, take it easy. And just getting you in that mindset to get back on the oars. I wouldn't have done it with anyone else, and I don't think I could do it with anyone else still. And I don't think I'm going to do it again because of that reason. And then, of course, it's all about having fun. And if any of you know me, I am quite theatrical. Some would say dramatic, but I don't agree with that. But when the mood's low, you've got to build them up again. So we had a little sing-song at about 500 miles to go. And that's how you know we're that's how
every day.
and that's how you know we're really friends, because he actually didn't throw me overboard at any point.
Charlie thinks he's got a great voice,
Especially after 28 days at sea. And then the most exciting thing happened on day 40. We were trying to do video logs every day to try and send back, and we missed a lot, honestly. But then out on the horizon, we saw a little bit of light pollution, and then the sun came up and we carried on rowing. We were watching the miles come down on our anemometer, and then we see Antigua.
Here we are! It's day 40! Yay! And we are 22 miles from Antigua! I'm going to turn this camera around, and you're not going to be able to see it on the camera, but I can see it with my eye.
It's just blue. That's literally all we saw. And it's really funny, having watched this race since I was a kid, probably about 12, 13, I started following it every year. Every year you see someone taking a video and be like, there's land, taking a picture, we see land. It's like, I can't see that. No one can see that on your camera. You've got to be there to witness that. And with land brings hot showers, loved ones, friends, family, real food that isn't out of a bag, or sugary snacks, and just the feeling of pulling into English Harbour on Saturday night at 5 p.m. in golden hour is unparalleled. Even the support boat that came out to start, the media boat came out to start filming us and taking pictures, was like, you've picked the perfect time to come in. This is something we haven't experienced before. As we were pulling into the harbour, about 40 people swam out to our boat, and it was all the other teams, all the 4s and 5s that had come in before us, swam out to see us in. Every super yacht, like Ben was saying, was blasting their horn. It was just a moment that still doesn't feel like real life to me. Like when you wake up from a dream, it's hard to put into words. The first embrace, the interview after, and just stepping onto land for the first time, it honestly feels like you'd had 10 beers. You couldn't stand up. You were all over the place, but filled with joy. I also really love the fact that our before and after pictures just make us look like we had a good time. Oh, you got a suntan, you've been working out a little bit, and yeah. So we really appreciate Penny, the race photographer, for waiting a day to take it. It brings us to our why, and why we signed up, why we were doing this, and often it came to us on the boat, like, why are we here? And we're doing this for Greenheart, who are based here in Charleston. If you don't know about them, they go into the public schools and build urban farms, getting kids out of the classroom to learn about food and where it comes from. It's something that's been so important, not just to my journey, but to Ben's as well. When Ben was 16, he ate himself into recovery from an illness. When I landed in Charleston, I ate myself fitter. And it wasn't just about the cycling, it was changing your mindset on food. It's something that's not talked about, I think, enough, especially in the education system. Growing up in England, we were lucky to have a guy, Jamie Oliver, that radically changed stuff. And that was a big influence on my life. So then to help these guys and see what they're doing in Charleston has been so huge and amazing. We've worked with them for 5 years, and this is now the biggest project we've done for them. And we are going to have one more big party with them towards the end of the month to celebrate everything and this whole mission. So yeah, we're the Dreamboats. Thank you so much for listening. I know a few of you might have some questions, so we are all ears, and I'm sure Brian's got something to add as well.
Sure, people have questions.
So while you were on the boat, what did you miss the most, or like realize you took for granted at home? And then now that you're home, what do you miss the most about being on the boat?
That's a really good question. I think I missed the most, obviously, like loved ones, and just like the simple things, like really simple things, like a soft pillow was huge, a hot shower, massive. The stuff that you do every day that you don't realise you do. So like getting clean clothes that have been nicely folded in your drawer, not pulling out a t-shirt that you wore 3 weeks ago from a wet bag. That was like a really big one. And then being back, the thing I miss about the boat was the simplicity of life on the boat. Like, you knew exactly what you had to do. I always knew that I had Ben looking out for me and I was looking out for him. And, you know, sometimes in life you don't have that in your everyday, or you don't realise you have that in your everyday, more so. So that was like a big thing. And also not being able to go on social media. That was really nice.
Yeah, that simplicity, I think, how you apply that, the things that you did miss, maybe when you're on the boat, you've come back and you've thought, you know, I don't need all those things, or I could streamline how I'm doing stuff, or that's not important. I think one of the big things that happened is when you have things like the capsize, you have these really make or break moments in your life, and so then when you get on land, you shed a lot of weight because you've had this experience. So I often think about that. But the other thing is, what I think of often is, who struggled to get up this morning? Who struggled to wake up? Or get out of bed with their alarm? I told my wife when we woke up this morning early, because we did a kids presentation, I said, Kate, imagine if this bed was rocking and you had gone to bed an hour previously, and then we had to do that again and again and again for 40 days. And she said, that's just horrible. But I couldn't do that. But there was something really amazing about that routine. I found that it was like your world, and it's hard to describe it. You create it, and I think Charlie and I got to create a world that was filled with all the things we just talked about. And it's very hard on land to have that much control over your world. You know, we ate a plant-based diet because that's all we had, apart from some things I brought on that I didn't tell Charlie about. But we ate well. Like, we didn't drink coffee. We didn't go on social media. It wasn't available. It was just like a really simple, the moon powers solar panels. Well, we only know that because we were at night and we saw some cycles of the moon. So those are little things that in everyday life we don't appreciate. Who knows where the moon is right now, where it's in its cycle? I don't. Whereas every day we'd be like, oh wow, the moon's come up again. Look how much bigger it is, and oh, I hope he charges the solar panels tonight. So we were so in touch with that, and that was a really beautiful thing to experience.
How did the experience itself compare to your expectations going in?
It was very humbling, very quickly as well. I think there were things that I definitely expected to be a lot harder, and things I expected to be a lot easier. I thought I was going to get really seasick. I was like almost like crippled with fear going into it, because Ben was sick on land, and I was like, in 2 days I'm going to be useless. So I was like really quite paranoid about that. And then we get out there, and I've managed to not feel nauseous once, and unfortunately Ben was, but I thought we were both going to be in the same situation, so I thought that was going to be a lot harder. I honestly thought the routine was going to be easier, of like getting up, keeping clean, like living on the boat. Like, if you've ever had to try and wash yourself from salt water, rocking on a 25-foot boat where you can't stand up, I still have nightmares about that, because you just have to get into like painful positions to make sure you're getting all the salt off you, and then a wave breaks on you and you have to do it all again. So that was a lot harder.
Yeah, I think the hardest, everything's damp. So like your clothes, I think one of the things we talked about often was just wearing damp clothes and you're sweating in them all the time, and you never have anything that's just like, that's the thing you miss. You just want one item of clothing that's clean. But one of the things no one talks about in ocean rowing, and we had guys who are, SAS solo rowers, and some of the people we know who have done it are really some of the toughest people in the world. But you cry uncontrollably, and I mean uncontrollably, for days, and there's, I don't know the explanation. You're rowing away from safety. This was a huge surprise to us. At one point at day 5, we said, we got to stop crying. We're crying over breakfast. We just would not stop crying, and we were even crying about trying to stop crying. And so it was this afternoon where we were really trying to stop crying, and I remember Charlie said, like, pass me the sunscreen, and he was crying. And we just gotta stop. We gotta stop crying. But it's something that's happening in your mind is transitioning from, as I said, I think it's everything you know and you love and that's safe, and you're going backwards into this sort of an unknown filled with fear. And somehow your mind it's cathartic. I described it as basically it's the ocean. You just are stripped bare, and then if you want to, you can be built back up. But it is, everyone has it, and I've spoken to everyone, and you just cry, or you go back to the, oh, I'm okay, man, I'm okay, and you go in the cabin, it's just like bam. We both had it. So
how has your relationship changed as a result? How did it change going on the trip? How's it changed now? When you started?
I think because we had quite a close relationship like beforehand, it really helped on the row. I think it was really set in stone on our training rows where you're on the boat for 3-4 days together. You're putting yourself through this big physical challenge. That really helped build up what was then to become such a strong bond on the ocean. Even thinking back to the first, we went off to Utah to do this Everesting challenge, and that was actually the first time. Sounds ridiculous. You don't think about sharing a room with your friend like when you're older. It's like, oh yeah. So we were sharing a hotel room, and it's like, oh, this is a bit weird. The first time I was like, oh, this is a bit weird. And then it's like, by the way, I snore. I sleep. I'm a heavy sleeper, just to let you know. And then was like, oh yeah, I found that out straight away. And it wasn't like, oh, we've got to like change the rooms. You've got to sleep in the bathroom. No. It's like, cool, that's fine. And then growing through that into making the room smaller and smaller until it was a tiny cabin, helped bring that bond together, I think.
Yeah, there's a relationship. We made some, again, back to those rules. We really spoke to some people, you included, about what the where things go wrong in these sort of journeys is relationship driven. Like, you're going to get across the Atlantic at some point. The prevailing winds are going to take you across. But if you want to do it in a way that I would go and do it again with Charlie, maybe not tomorrow, but if we had time to prepare for it, we had a great experience, and it's because we really dialed in on our communication, and we knew each other's strengths and each other's weaknesses. And so we really played into that. And I think that's something you guys have got to think about, if it's work, if it's family, if it's at school. Like, it's okay to be different, and it's okay to, like, I am not as strong as Charlie. And we used to bet at night who could row the furthest. And I very quickly stopped doing that because Charlie was rowing further than me. I still owe you a lot of things, actually. So Charlie was stronger than me. And then I'll give you another example. They were Charlie so strong, our boat had slowed down at one point. And again, very much every 2 hours we were racing. Like, we never let up this. It's what we decided to do. Not everyone does that. And our boat had slowed down. And Charlie said, Charlie, the boat's slowing down. It looks like they're gaining on us. Like, something's up. No, nothing's up. What can we do? Charlie said, row harder. Because he's so strong, that's what Charlie wanted to do. Well, because I'm not as strong, I've spent all the time on the boat. How do I make the boat go faster so I can catch up with Charlie's times? So I was always fiddling with the trim of the boat, where the weight was in the boat, if we could shed some weight, if we had too much water for that day that we're carrying. So I was thinking about it differently, which is great, where we had barnacles growing on the bottom. So we stopped And then we looked at the problem. We took half an hour to look at it, and we realized that we had eaten, or because we'd eaten so much food, our center of gravity was high and the boat was sitting higher. So we ended up taking some weight, we put it lower. The mule was back on the oars and we were going. But the answer was not row harder. So we played to our strengths. And I think that was something that we learned about each other. Just how different we are, but how that's really made us a really, really good team. I think you see Charlie, again, singing all the time. Like, that's Charlie's personality, so it's you want to be around that. And again, I'm not doing that. I think if we'd both been doing that, it might have been a bit much. It's like the karaoke boat. But so yeah, I think it's really, really good. I always think when you're building a team, is find somebody who's really shares your values but offers something very different.
In those moments of like extreme fear, like paralyzing fear, I'm sure, how did you overcome it?
There was no backing down from it, honestly, and especially as the weather started to get bigger, I think I had got into this mindset of we have to go through it, and we've trained for this, and I think Ben was more in his head about it. And it was like, we understand, like, you have to understand what you're going into to be able to do it in the way we did. And in that moment, you know, sometimes you just need a phone call to someone. That someone for us was luckily Duncan, who's a world-renowned ocean rower. And like I said, he even said, I haven't been in seas that big, but I know that you're trained to do this. And the thing you don't want to do is wish this away. You're here in this moment and you've chosen to be here, so learn from everything you're doing. And that really, I think, helped us face up to that fear. And actually, the fear of the big seas and the weather actually became the thing we were we were lucky enough to have. And so that pushed us further and kept us on our toes, kept us more alert. And there were some really tough days where we'd go to 1 hour on, 1 hour off, because it was so big that you want to make sure that every moment you're on deck, you're fully focused on where that next wave's coming from, how much you're putting your oars in, making sure to not get caught, because if you get caught, you'll capsize. So we shortened the time we were on deck to kind of battle with that. And it was just having that ability to adapt and analyze what you're doing in the moment.
Yeah, and I think the word being paralyzed by fear, I think, is a great phrase, because you are, you literally, you're out there, you decided to do it. Everything around you is just bigger and scarier, and it's all new. So I think, again, you just have to go through it. It's not until you're out on the other side and the sun's coming up the next day that you think, okay, I've come out the other side. I think when you're in it, you just have to do the best you can with everything around you and try and be calm. And I think what Charlie just said about speaking to someone about it, it feels a lot better to just talk. We had a satellite phone, and as he said, we called Duncan. Hey, Duncan. I think I called him. You asked me to call him because I was paralyzed. I mean, I was saying, Charlie, you don't know what we're going into. Like, the waves in 2 days' time are going to be bigger than houses, and our boat is going to be skidding down them. And our boat can't go as fast. The rest of the fleet went to what is called para anchor. So they deployed a parachute and said, we're just going to sit where we are and face into the waves. But again, because we had committed to making the boat go as fast as we can across. And I think Duncan said, you guys are moving in the right direction. Do not go on a para anchor. So again, it's really about like speaking to someone, I'm absolutely petrified, and that person saying, you got this. And it just, I mean, he wasn't there, he didn't do anything to say, he just said, you got this. You're like, okay, great, thanks. But it helps, it helped. When someone says, you got this, you're like, all right, I think I got this.
It's also the honesty, like being honest with each other, being like, I am scared now. If you kind of try and brush it off, it's always going to be a problem. Whereas if you do talk about it, and sometimes it's with the person you're with, sometimes it's with someone on the other end of the phone, that talking part is like the first step to facing your fear.
And then last bit about two teammates, right? So everyone's got different skill sets. So Charlie's calm in that moment. I'm thinking, oh my God, houses coming down on us. Then you get into the moment of like action, and we have to start doing stuff, and then you start really working together and as a team, and you find each other. It's like, oh man, we've got this. Like, we're so comfortable in this environment. Like, this is where we're thriving, and that really did happen. Like, once you've got over that hurdle, we're like, oh no, we know how to drag lines behind the boat. We're now slowing down. We can monitor each other. We can do the 1 hour on, 1 hour off. So like, you go into just a different mindset as soon as you've committed to it. I think that's the big thing. Commit to whatever it is. Once you've committed, there can't be any fear, because then you're in danger and you're in trouble, and then it just snowballs. If you're decided to go off Paranka, take on this thing, surf down waves, that's the commitment. And I think that's one of the things we sort of learn is when you're in those moments, no talking, we're doing. And I think that's something we found really impactful. And that's about training. You know, we had our first storm off the coast of Savannah in the summer, and it was horrific. But we had felt what it felt like to be in a storm, so like we got out there, got in it before. So yeah, the training part is really, really important. Don't go into a storm without.
What does it feel like surfing down the back end of the wave? Like, what does that feel like?
$1 million.
It does, but one of the big ones, I think what you're trying to do is that you're trying to get your boat to slow down and there's a sailor in the corner, like to plop over the back of the wave and have some weight to drag you down. So really what you're just everything you can do to slow the boat. I think when you're in the big stuff, there's nothing, you just want to slow everything down. Obviously when it's the waves that you saw on that video, that feels fantastic. You're like, wow, we're going 4 or 5 knots towards Antigua. It's going to be amazing. But on the bigger stuff, it's about trying to slow everything down and try and control like that boat. And so that's what you're doing. You're literally throwing stuff on the back of the boat, off the back of the boat, and dragging it so you plop over the wave so you don't surf down it. So that's a different feeling, slowing everything down, because you spend the whole trip trying to go faster. He's surfing down Charlie's. It's not quite true.
You both mentioned the simplicity of life on boat, the routine and so forth. Is there anything that sort of mental thought that brought into your life now? Did you change anything as a result of enjoying simplicity?
I think trying to stick to a more regimented routine was something that I noticed since coming back. I try and have like time slots where it's like, okay, this is what I'm going to do now. Now I can do this. Rather than before, I'd try and take on too much at once, and then you get overwhelmed. It's like on the boat you can't do that. You're rowing, or you're making the food, or you're cleaning the deck, or you're making the water. Trying to do too much at once is impossible, because you have to give everything to the one thing you're doing. And I've just noticed that since coming back, just taking a little bit more of a pragmatic approach to things, and like segmenting it in a way. Segmenting your day really helps.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, it's hard. I gotta be honest. You come back and you're just like straight back into life, and that's. I think you underestimate how hard it is to like not do that, and like just to take a little bit of extra time, and so I think it's pretty early days, but definitely as it goes to communication with people. I think there's just so many lessons that we keep talking about, and we work together as well. So like, how do we take on that challenge, and how do we apply all the things that we've just done to that situation? And like, yeah, we can row the Atlantic. We can write a good menu.
I know it hasn't been long, but have you been able to find just being at home without the next adventure on the calendar, or how does it feel kind of mentally post-adrenaline?
I think
I struggle with that post-adventure.
Yeah, I think we got back 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and because Charlie, again, I speak to Charlie a million times a day, and I see Charlie every day, and so we get to continue our journey. There's a lot of banter in the car on the way over here about music, and so we've been able to sort of share that and continue that. I think if Charlie went and was living in New York and I was living here, and I'm just doing this talk without him, that becomes a harder, because we've had this shared experience, and I don't want it to end, right? I guess so. I understand that, but I feel very lucky that we're doing this together, I guess.
I would definitely be lying if I said I haven't thought about the next adventure. I think it took a grand total of 3 days on land before I was like, well, what is next? But it was all kind of in jest and really like taking time, especially getting back to Charleston. Like, we were away for 3 months almost. So getting back here was like actually taking the time to be like, this is home, this is what I want for at least a year, just this. Let's not go crazy on this. And I've spoken with some people, Ben included, about like what challenge might be next. Definitely won't be rowing. Probably won't be on the water. Something shorter.
And going back to that, we have friends who do this for a living. I mean, that's all they do. And actually, it becomes. I'm thinking of a couple. If you're always chasing that next thing, they're the same people who also said, I've never really enjoyed any of the expeditions I've done. And I think if I could take one lesson from those people that they gave us, and the nugget would be, do this, enjoy it, and finish something. And there's a lot of giving back to do, there's a lot of growth to do. We had so many amazing people help us. Like, so many people made sacrifices for us over the last year and a half. So like, that's also a piece that I think is really important at the end of something like this, is to like take some time to do that. And as I said, if you talk to some people who have done some extraordinary things, and when it comes to adventure, if you're always chasing the next thing and you're always doing the next round of sponsors, I think that you get on a hamster wheel like that, and I don't think it's a healthy place. In fact, I know it's not a healthy place to be. So yeah, there's a lot of giving back as well. And if someone else wants to do an adventure, like, I would love to help support that and say, well, maybe these are the things I've learned. Can I help you go and do something? And then I'll pick up my next desire. But I think that's what that community is so strong. Is like, someone could email me now and be like, can I talk to you about ocean rowing? Or can I talk to you, I want to go and I want to sign up for something. And I'd be like, well, let's talk about how to do it. Like, so yeah, that's some thoughts I have.
So you make this huge commitment to row the Atlantic. Why the commitment to win?
Good question.
I mean, we never set out to win, in all honesty.
Well, it sounds like you did though, right? Like, speed was always the...
We wanted to give it our best shot and be accountable to what we were doing. And then, especially when you get to La Gomera where the race starts, everyone's sizing you up. And there are some guys, literally the boat two away from us, with these two guys, Tickerilla, both ex-SBS, which is like the special boat service in the UK, like the cream of the crop when it comes to like seafaring military. And they were sizing us up. They were big guys, they were stronger than us, they had more experience. A lot of the fleet were like big rowing, full out people, and we were like, well, we're going to have fun. And we've trained for this, we've trained 2 years. And the only time we really realised we had won was when we had established a 100-mile lead and we were 200 miles from Antigua. And it was that moment. In fact, I think Ben even turned to me, it was only when we saw land, so 22 miles out, that Ben turned was like, I think we've won this. It's like, we never went out to like beat anyone in a race. It was really just against ourselves and to give all that we could to this project that we'd signed up to do.
Yeah. So, and I think the question is, did we set out to win the race, and was that our sole goal? And the answer is no. We trained really hard. We did a lot of work. We put in probably more hours than most. We didn't look like the fittest team. We didn't come across as the most experienced team. I think when we started, we were like, wow, we're in great shape here. And I think that's when it was honestly the first couple of days when we made such a good start. We were close to the front of the whole pack. And that was when I think we were like, game on. And then what Charlie, I don't think, is saying is, once you decided that we're going to race, there's no turning back, because if you want to race in this, it is all out all the time. So like, there's no time not no time for taking pictures, but like you're so tired, you're getting into the thing, you've got to do this chores, I'm never going to be late for my shift. So it was a very different experience as a crossing, one that I think about, like, you know, there just wasn't any time for anything but rowing as fast as you could across the Atlantic. So that light bulb was when we made that start, which I think when you see in that slide. But we definitely trained as if we wanted to do it as fast as we could and prepared. Whether we were capable, I don't think we knew that.
My question actually goes back to the initial performance review, which when you said I want to row the Atlantic, and you look at the dream versus reality, and you've never rowed, you've never left a harbor, you don't have a boat. Why did you say you want to row the Atlantic, and why did you have this dream to begin?
So my dream started when I was about 11 or 12. There was an Olympic rower, James Cracknell, that did it with a TV personality in the UK, and they made a short documentary, or in fact it was 6 short documentaries, like a 6-part series on rowing the Atlantic, and they signed up with 2 months to do it, and one was an Olympic rower, one was a TV personality that had never really done any competitive sports, and they struggled with training, struggled to teach the TV personality how to row, and I was like, well, if they can do it and they get across, I think that's something that's worth giving it a shot. I then had a friend do it in 2018. Again, he joined a team, I think, with 4 months before they left because someone had dropped out of a team. And he had actually sailed all over the world. He used to deliver super yachts. It's like, okay, so you've got sea experience, but you were still out of shape. And he was a chef as well. I was like, still out of shape, and you managed to get in shape in 4 months and row and compete. So I think, why not do the hardest thing you can imagine? And at that point in my life, having moved here, when I moved over, I was around 340 pounds. I lost 100 pounds just cycling everywhere, eating better. And it was like, I wanted to plant like a flag on my timeline and say, this is what you can achieve when you put your mind to it. So why not go for the hardest thing possible?
Yeah. And why did you say I want to do it?
So I had a friend in 2013 who sent me an email titled, I just rode the Atlantic. I fell off my chair. There's no way this guy's done it. And he actually, so that's how I found out about it. And so I'd always thought at some point I want to do this. And then it's hard to find the right time. COVID was happening. And you need, sometimes when things are tough, I was drinking far too much, stressed out of it. Just had 2 young children, and it was really fairly dire. Everything had gone from great to a nightmare. So I found I had a similar experience with biking across the US when I was in a similar mindset, and I had a very incredible experience doing that. So that was I wanted to find something big that was outside of my work and my everyday life that was going to help me ultimately. Would affect how I deal with all the other stuff that was happening. So that's why I said, Charlie, this is the time, which would seem like the worst time ever, but knowing that it's 2 years, because once you replace a lot of negative stuff in your life with something that's overwhelmingly positive, you get at all this fluff goes. So there's no time, I can't be drinking because I've got to train with this guy at 4:30 in the morning. I've got to spend all of my waking time either with my family or thinking about how we get this boat. And so that was, that's just a lesson that I've learned. If you're struggling a bit, sign up for something or do something. And that's what Charlie sparked, that oh God, yeah, no, this is a great time. I actually spoke to Alex about it. I said, Alex, I'm going to go and row the Atlantic. And sure it's a good time. Seems like maybe sign up next year when the world is not falling apart. No, it seems like a great time, right? Go see Brian.
Any other questions?
So, how would you say it's re-entry? You guys spent so much time, just the two of you. You have this routine, you have this bond, this relationship. And obviously the goal is always my family, my wife can go after my kids. How was that, and how did you give yourself the grace, I guess, to just move through that and being used to having them be there and them being used to kind of getting reaccustomed to just having you there and you having them there, giving them the attention that they need and have missed, but also kind of giving yourself the space to kind of re-enter.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I thought the idea that, so this is your thing, right? So whenever we're doing stuff, Charlie I chose to row the Atlantic, so I'm going to re-enter. My family had a very different experience, but they also had to come along on it with me. So understanding how Kate and my wife and my son, especially my son who's 5, he was totally over the row, right? He didn't actually even greet me to get off. I think there was fear he thought I was going to get eaten by a shark, but his school, it was all about me, and he was like, well, I'm pretty important too. So I think giving people space to it was kind of over for them. And something I've learned, it was if you ask that question, it was finding, for Oscar, he didn't want to talk about the row ever again, right? It's just we did it. And similar for Kate, she's like, I kind of did the thing with you as well. And personally, you're selfish. I mean, it's incredibly selfish doing this stuff. So giving everyone space that they need to do that, and acknowledging, one, it's selfish, and two, that the other people have been through a lot. So, Kate's not here this evening, and I don't think Kate wants to be here this evening because Kate's heard enough about the Dreamboats. I wasn't there at Christmas. I sent her capsized messages, and she's got 2 young children. So I think that is a lesson that I've learned, that it was my journey. I've got Charlie. We can share on that stuff. I can re-enter with Charlie and when Kate when she's ready. But definitely Oscar taught me a lot about it's time to realize that this affected all of us. That was my experience.
I think, coming back into Charleston, the re-entry into your everyday life, getting to land doesn't feel very real, and there is this huge sense of selfishness. I was really lucky to have my parents out in Antigua. Obviously my parents live in the UK, came to Antigua to see me in, and it was the most time I'd spent with them in 5 years, and it's well, why don't I do that? Why don't I go over there more? And it's there's been the row that's got in the way of that, and training, and I was lucky to go back before. Little things like that, and then getting back to Charleston was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. We had 2 weeks kind of decompression before I came back, and coming back into your everyday life, I was scared to leave the house. I was and I had this great sense of guilt of I'm not okay, and I felt bad about it because I've just done my childhood dream. And everyone was I was so proud of you. So, well, I've, like Ben said, I wasn't there for Christmas. I wasn't there for New Year's. There was stuff going on here, and I wasn't there to support Kelly, my girlfriend. And it's there was a strange guilt coming back.
I cried in Whole Foods buying toilet paper, and I was like, what is going on?
It's the first 5 days at sea.
Get it together. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for being here.